All right, so we're back. We're back. All right. So we're going to cover a whole lot of topics, so I don't expect you to get it all. So I invite you to go to our website there at evidenceandanswers.org. And there we have over 500 podcasts that you can listen to on many of the topics and questions that we're addressing here, and a whole lot more from Christian scholars and experts from all over the world. Well, I'm going to speak for about 15 minutes, and then the last 15 minutes is for your questions, okay? So send them on in. But we're going to begin. Since we had some trouble last week, I think we got the glitches worked out, at least most of it. This is only our second show, so we're working on it. But since the first half of the show was missing, I'm going to cover what I went over on the first half of the show. So those of you who are watching, there's nothing wrong with your YouTube or nothing wrong with your computer. Simply going over what we missed last week. And we're going to begin with life's greatest question. This is the greatest question everyone must answer. And the question is this: is there a God? Does God exist? That is the big question, all right, that everyone must answer. For if God does not exist, then we live in a universe void of any meaning, of any hope, of any significance, and of any purpose. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, if God does not exist, there's really no intended purpose for the universe to be here. We've got to ask ourselves that question, right? Why is the universe here? Why are you here? Why am I here? Why is anything here? If we're simply accidents, products of chance, if that's all that the universe is, then really there's no reason for the universe to exist. It's simply an accident. And we conclude you and I are ultimately just accidents, products of nature. There's no ultimate purpose for our existence here, all right? And as the universe expands, it's going to run out of energy, and it's going to reach a state we call final entropy, and the universe comes to an end. All right, and in the end, you and I are annihilated and extinct. The sun runs out of energy and the sun comes to an end. Eventually, all things end in death and annihilation. So we have to ask ourselves the question, what difference did it ever make that we were ever here? I mean, everything ends in death and annihilation. The doctor who fights for life every day, well, everything in the end it's a futile battle. It all ends in death and extinction. The scientist who makes great discoveries to cure diseases like COVID-19 that we're facing, it all ends in death and annihilation. The soldier who battles for freedom and gives their life on the foreign battlefield, all that ends in death and annihilation. So what difference does it make that we were ever here? Everything ends in death and annihilation. Now, I was on a debate once with a guy named Luke. He had one of the most popular websites out there, atheist websites out there. And he looked at, as we were having this debate over the radio, he said, well, Pat, that's just simply your opinion, all right? And I said, it's not my opinion. I'm simply repeating what you atheists have been saying for nearly 2 centuries. You know, and he said, like who? And so I quoted Bertrand Russell and others. And if you want some contemporary atheists today who understand the implications of their atheism if God does not exist, Dr. Will Provine, biology professor at Cornell University, might have said it best. He said this: let me summarize my views on what modern evolutionary biology tells us loud and clear. There are no gods, no purposes, no goal-directed forces of any kind. There is no life after death. When I die, I'm absolutely certain that I'm going to be dead. That's the end for me. There's no ultimate foundation for ethics, no ultimate meaning to life, and no free will for humans either. Now, there's a guy that clearly understands the implications if God does not exist, right? He said there's really no purpose, no goal for our existence. We simply are annihilated and extinct. And he takes it further. He said, really, there's no foundation for ethics, no ultimate free will. And he's exactly right. I mean, if God does not exist, then really our lives are ultimately meaningless. Everything ends in death and annihilation. Ethics becomes meaningless too. Because what difference does it make whether I live like Adolf Hitler or Mother Teresa? It really doesn't make a difference. All ends in death and annihilation. Richard Dawkins, the leader of the new atheist movement, he said this. He said, "The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference." Really, that's really all that there is if God does not exist. So here are two contemporary men, scientists, who've deeply thought through the atheist worldview and have really come to honest conclusions of their worldview. If God does not exist, ultimately then, we live in a meaningless universe with no significance, no purpose, and ultimately no hope. You know, I was an atheist for a while, and it's kind of a sad state to be living with that understanding. However, that's the implication of the atheist worldview if you look at it honestly. Now, that's a pretty grim outlook. However, I think the evidence that God exists is pretty compelling. I think the evidence is stronger that he exists than he does not exist. And so if God exists, it changes the whole ballgame. Then we live in a universe that has been designed and created by God for a purpose. And our lives then have meaning and significance, a purpose for which he has designed you and I. He has a plan for you and I, which we are called to discover and to fulfill. Well, then what are the evidences for the existence of God? Well, the first one is called the argument from first cause, all right, or the cosmological argument. It's a very simple argument, and it goes like this. Whatever has a beginning must have a cause, okay? Whatever has a beginning must have a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore, the universe must have a cause, and you must identify what that cause is, okay? Whatever has a beginning has a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe must have a cause. And the law of cause and effect is also in play here, right? Every cause has an effect, every effect has a cause. No effect is greater than its cause. So whatever caused the universe is greater than the universe. All right? Now, this argument is built on the premise that the universe has a beginning. And indeed, the evidence is very compelling that the universe has a beginning. You know, for nearly 2 centuries, scientists thought the universe was eternal. But in recent times, we have discovered the universe has a beginning. Scientists call it the Big Bang, all right? And the scientific community has pretty much swung the other way. It's pretty unanimous now that the universe has a beginning. It is not eternal. It has a beginning. What are some of the evidences that the universe has a beginning? Well, Einstein, the great physicist, was trying to prove how the universe holds its shape without collapsing due to the force of gravity. And he, with his tremendous mathematical genius and the great mathematical equation he created, he discovered the universe does not collapse in on itself, but due to the force of gravity. But indeed, it doesn't collapse because it is expanding. All right? In other words, the universe has a beginning, and it has been expanding ever since. This is the famous theory of relativity that Einstein discovered. Now, what he discovered in theory has been confirmed in recent scientific study. One we call the radiation afterglow, or the radiation echo. Penzias and Wilson won a Nobel Prize for this. They built a huge radar dish and were looking for signs of extraterrestrial life. And wherever they pointed their radar dish, anywhere in the universe, they've discovered this hiss, all right, or the radiation echo, or the radiation afterglow, all right, the after effects of a large, gigantic explosion that they trace back to the beginning of the universe. So this is the radiation afterglow discovered by Penzias and Wilson. They won a Nobel Prize for this. Then Edwin Hubble discovered the red shift. He won another scientific award for this. With the telescopes we have now, all right, these satellite telescopes that we have there that orbit the Earth, now we can see into the far reaches of the universe as we had never done before. And Edwin Hubble discovered that the galaxies are moving apart, and as they move apart, they become redder. That's called the red shift. In other words, the universe is expanding. And finally, the second law of thermodynamics, that the universe is running out of usable energy. If the universe were eternally old, all the energy would be used up, right? So all this points to the fact that the universe has a beginning. It is not eternal. It has a beginning. Scientists call it the Big Bang, when the universe exploded into being out of nothing. All right, Einstein showed that time, matter, and energy and space are all interconnected. You can't have one without the other. Therefore, the universe exploded into being out of nothing. Now remember, whatever has a beginning must have a cause. The universe has a beginning, therefore the universe must have a cause. And what is the cause of that universe? I believe Genesis 1:1 is the most reasonable answer. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, the second argument is called the design argument, and it goes like this. Every design has a designer. The universe shows highly complex design. Therefore, the universe has a designer, right? For example, right, say you are flying from Hawaii to California, and the plane crashes in the Pacific Ocean, and you're the only one that survives, and you make it to a deserted island, and it doesn't appear that anyone else is on the island. And as you're walking along the beach there, you discover a watch in the ground, all right? Now, what would you immediately assume? Would you assume that natural forces, the lightning, the wind, the waves, and the rocks, created this watch? No, you would assume, all right, that intelligence created this object because there's complexity and there's design. And when we see complexity and design, it points to an intelligent designer. You would assume there's someone else on that island who dropped that watch. There's someone else on that island, right? Now, could natural causes create that watch? Sure. But what's the more reasonable conclusion? Natural causes or an intelligent designer? I would say an intelligent designer. And you look throughout the universe, from the telescope to the microscope, we see intelligent design throughout the universe. All right? For example, the four fundamental forces of nature that hold the universe together, that give us the universe that we have, sit in a very delicate balance. They sit on a razor's edge, so that if you alter any of these forces, even just infinitesimally a small amount, we cannot have the universe that we have now. For example, the force of gravity is at just the right strength, so that the universe expands at just the right rate. All right? If the force of gravity were any weaker, the universe would expand too fast and matter would not be able to come together. We would not have the stars and the planets and the galaxies that we have today. If the force of gravity were any bit weaker, matter would clump too densely and we could not have the universe that we have today. The expansion rate of the universe is just at the right rate because the force of gravity is just at the right rate. Astronomers have discovered that if you just alter the expansion rate by 1/10 to the 60th power, you cannot have the universe that we have today. That's how delicately balanced our universe is. And then we have things like DNA, all right, the amino acid combinations. Just to make one protein cell, all right, the probability of that coming about by chance, all right, the mathematical probability is you know, for those of you in mathematics know, it's practically what we call a mathematical zero. Stephen Meyer, a scientist, he states that the probability of the right amino acids forming the precise sequence needed to form one protein molecule is one chance in 100,000 trillion, on and on. Right? That's a 10 with 125 zeros behind it. In other words, that's pretty much a mathematical zero, that by chance we could get the right amino acids forming just the right protein, all right? And put the proteins together to make RNA and then DNA. I mean, gosh, the mathematical probability of that is just astronomical, all right? Bill Gates, the computer genius, stated that DNA is far, far more complex than any software that has ever been created. So DNA coming together by chance is like saying a monkey jumped on a computer, and made the program for Microsoft Windows. That's how incredible the odds are, right? Richard Dawkins, the leader of the new atheist movement, stated this. He said, "The machine code of genes is uncannily computer-like. The pages of a molecular biology journal might be interchanged with those of a computer engineering journal." That's from a couple atheists here that I just quoted, right? Design points to a designer. The final argument is called the moral argument, all right? And it simply goes that every law has a lawgiver. There's an absolute moral law, therefore, there's an absolute moral lawgiver, all right? A universal moral law points to a moral lawgiver. You can't have a universal moral law without a moral lawgiver. Every culture in the world has basically the same ethical system. Murder is wrong in every culture of the world. Rape is wrong in every culture of the world. Adultery is wrong in every culture of the world. Where do we get that universal moral law? You can't have a moral law without a moral lawgiver. You can't say anything is objectively evil unless you have an absolute standard of good by which you're measuring it by. Where did that absolute standard come from? C.S. Lewis, the great scholar who came to Christ later in his life, wrestled with that issue. And he said this, "As an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe to when I called it unjust?" And so he understood that you can't call something objectively evil unless there's an absolute standard of good by which you're measuring it by, from which we have departed. Where did that absolute standard come from? And of course, the final argument for the existence of God is Jesus Christ, who claimed to be the divine Son of God and confirmed his claim through his miraculous, sinless life, death, and resurrection. All right? But we'll get to that later on, of course. So those are some of the arguments for the existence of God. Really, they're classic arguments that really have never been beaten. I think there are some of the most powerful arguments for the existence of a God. Now, let's take some of your questions here, and let's see if we can answer them. Now, the first one here is from Quackman. I hope he becomes a regular here, because this is a really good question here. He says, "Whatever has a beginning must have a cause." Correct. The law of causality. If God created the universe, then who created God? Hey, same one we had last week. Yes, who created God? Good question. All right. Remember, the argument is whatever has a beginning must have a cause. God does not have a beginning. He's eternal. All right. Therefore, he is the uncaused cause. All right. There has to be a beginning, or we would not have today, all right? Because we have today, time has a beginning, all right? You cannot transgress an infinite past, okay? There's got to be a starting point, what Aristotle calls the unmoved mover, all right? Let me give you an example. If you could live infinitely long, can you count from 0 to infinity? Yes, you could. You'd be doing it for the rest of your existence, all right? Because you have a beginning, right? But let's say, can you start from 0 to infinity, starting from negative infinity? You never could, all right? Because you cannot traverse an infinite past, okay? So therefore, there must be a beginning, all right? And whatever created time is greater than time. All right? Whatever created this universe is highly intelligent, highly powerful. I believe of all the books of the literature of the world, the best answer comes from the Bible, Genesis 1:1. All right? God is that unmoved mover who begins all things. Right? Great question there. Let's take a look at the next question here. Same guy. He says, doesn't evolution explain morality? Animals of high intelligence seem to exhibit love, community, and cooperation too. All right? No, animals function by what we call instinct. Okay? They don't have a moral code as we have. For example, all right, when a lion takes over a pride, he kills all the cubs of the females. All right? He just kills them. Why? So that the females will go into heat and he can mate with them. All right? Now that, if a human being did that, let's say he marries a wife of and this is her second marriage, and she has children. If he went over there and killed all the children so that, he could start his own family, well, we'd throw him in jail immediately. All right? I was just watching Discovery Channel the other day. A snake won't just bite criminals. A snake bites anyone. All right? And I was just watching a special where a boa constrictor ate a baby, an infant baby. All right? An innocent child, and a snake ate him. All right? So animals function by instinct, all right, rather than by a moral conscience. So that extends the argument, okay? That moral law code must come from a personal being. It doesn't come from nature. Okay, nature doesn't display any kind of moral conscience. A tsunami doesn't just kill the wicked. It kills everybody. Men, women, children, dogs, cats, everybody. All right? The animal kingdom doesn't display any kind of human moral conscience or law code. All right? An animal will kill a little child as well as will an older adult. All right? Doesn't matter. A moral law code comes from a moral being, all right, a highly intelligent being. And because we're created in the image of God, we reflect that moral law code, that moral conscience. Okay? Very good question. And this is the last question here from our same friend, Quackman here. He's very engaged, very intelligent individual here. Think he's going to be a regular on the show here. It says, even if you can prove God exists, then how do you know whether it's one of the Hindu gods or the Christian God? Very good. And I have proven here today that a God exists. We haven't gotten to a point to we can say which God that is. But I've seemed to be able to build the case that indeed an intelligent designer does indeed exist. All right, now who that intelligent designer is, has he made himself specifically known, all right, through some special means? We call that special revelation. Well, that's what we'll be investigating in weeks to come. But this week, I pretty much wanted to show that indeed, if the universe has a beginning, the universe must have a cause. All right? The design shows he is an intelligent being. All right? And he has a moral law code. Therefore, he is a personal being. All right? So it cannot be pantheism. All right? Because pantheism teaches God and the universe are one. All right? And the universe is eternal. And God is not a personal being. God is a it. God is the energy, the cosmic energy of the universe. Well, we've shown here that the universe has a beginning. Therefore, can't be any God consistent with a pantheistic worldview. All right? Therefore, we rule out things like Hinduism and the New Age and Taoism and pantheistic forms of Buddhism and those other kinds of religions. We rule out atheism, all right? Because intelligent design or complexity in design point to an intelligent designer. The fact that the universe has a beginning, the fact that we have a moral law code points to an intelligent creator. So atheism is out. So really the last man standing is the theistic worldview, all right, that indeed there is a God who created all things. And when we come back next time, we're going to talk more specifically about who this intelligent creator, who this God is, and has he revealed himself in a special way, and can we know this God? And that's what we'll be talking about in days to come, all right? Well, thanks for being with us here. Thanks for sticking with us. We're still working through our issues, and we're going to be getting better each week as we keep going. So send your questions to pat@evidenceandanswers.org, pat@evidenceandanswers.org, and each week we're going to tackle some of the toughest questions and some of the toughest issues that Christians face today. All right? So we hope to see you here from the Honolulu Christian Church and Evidence and Answers. We look forward to seeing you again next week here on Question of the Week. Aloha.